Amber Hayes had gotten used to waking up tired. It was the kind of tired that didn't go away with sleep, the kind that settled deep in your bones from years of holding it all together when everything else was falling apart. At 6:03 a.m., the alarm on her cracked phone screen buzzed for the third time. She slapped it quiet and sat up slowly, trying not to wake Liam, still curled up under a faded Spider-Man blanket beside her. Their one-bedroom apartment above the hardware store didn't leave room for luxuries like privacy, but she'd learned to make do. She always did. Her back ached. The faucet in the kitchen still leaked, and her car, a '99 Corolla that coughed like a dying animal, refused to start the night before. Again. "Mom?" Liam's voice was small. "Go back to sleep, baby. Miss Janice will walk you to school." He mumbled something and turned over. Amber leaned down and kissed his forehead before slipping into her uniform, black pants, white button-up shirt, and a name tag that had lost its shine years ago. Amber, Golden Hour Diner. By 7:45 a.m. she was knocking on Janice's door, Liam's hand clutching hers tightly. "You okay, hun?" Janice asked, taking Liam's backpack. "You look pale." "Just tired." Again. She didn't mention the overdue rent notice slipped under her door or the credit card companies calling non-stop. She didn't mention that she hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday. Janice didn't ask. She just gave her a sad smile that said everything. Amber walked the 2 blocks to the diner. The streets were slick with last night's rain, and her shoes soaked through by the time she clocked in. She greeted her co-workers with half smiles and refilled the sugar jars without speaking. It was easier that way. The lunch rush came in like a tidal wave, contractors, college students, moms with kids, and then just like that it passed. By 2:30 p.m., the place had quieted down, the sound of a humming soda machine filling the space between the occasional clink of cutlery. That's when he walked in. Baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses on, nondescript, alone. Amber glanced up from wiping the counter. "Anywhere you like," she said, gesturing to the empty booths. He nodded silently and slid into the far corner, the one under the framed photo of the original 1950s diner. The booth was always in the shade, half hidden from view. She appreciated that he didn't make a fuss. Some customers needed too much. She walked over with a notepad, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Welcome to Golden Hour. Can I get you started with coffee?" He smiled slightly, voice soft. "Sure." She poured him a cup. He thanked her with a quick nod. "You look like you've had a day," he said after a moment. Amber blinked. "Just another Tuesday." He chuckled. "Tuesdays can be the hardest." "Huh?" She wasn't in the mood for small talk, but something about the way he spoke, calm, warm, maybe even a little sad, made her pause. She offered a weary smile and took his order. Nothing fancy, just a grilled cheese and tomato soup. As she walked back to the kitchen window, she glanced at him again. Something familiar, maybe in the jawline or the way he sat. But she shook it off. She'd seen 100 faces that week. Her brain was tired. Faces blurred together. She didn't know that the man in the booth had just come from a press conference in Miami. That hours earlier he was stepping off a private jet. That the sunglasses weren't just for disguise. They were a barrier, a way to get a moment of quiet from a world that rarely gave him any. She didn't know he was Max Verstappen. And Max? He didn't want her to know. He watched her move through the diner, noticed how she rubbed her wrist after pouring coffee for an elderly man, how she smiled politely even when her eyes screamed exhaustion. He wasn't used to being invisible, but today it felt good, necessary. And he saw something else in Amber, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Resilience. She brought his food without fanfare and didn't hover. That meant everything to him, but neither of them had any idea that this ordinary Tuesday was about to become the day both of their lives changed forever. The bell above the diner's door jingled softly behind Amber as she carried Max's grilled cheese and tomato soup to his booth. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the faded, checkered tiles. The smell of frying oil and coffee lingered in the air, as it always did. Comforting, familiar, just like her routine. She set the plate down gently. "Here you go, classic comfort food." Max smiled. "Smells great. Thank you." "No problem," she said, tucking the notepad into her apron. "If you need anything else, just holler." As she turned to leave, he surprised her. "You've worked here a long time." Amber paused. 6 years next month. Started part-time after my son was born. Stayed after my husband left. Not like I had a choice." She hadn't meant to say. That last part, it slipped out raw and real, like the way exhaustion slips into your bones without asking. Max didn't press. He just nodded, as if he understood. Amber glanced back at the counter. No one was waiting. For once, she didn't have to rush. She leaned her elbow lightly on the edge of the booth, just enough to let herself breathe. "He's 8 now," she continued. "My son, Liam. Smart kid, loves building things. Lego master of the universe." Max chuckled, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Sounds like someone I'd get along with. He'd talk your ear off, doesn't stop." She smiled, and for a second it was genuine, unguarded. "He wants to be an engineer. Says he's gonna build me a new car one day." Max looked at her closely. She was young, but worn. The way a tree gets worn from standing strong through too many storms. "You must be proud," he said. Amber nodded, eyes glistening. "He's the only reason I keep going." At the counter, someone pulled out a phone, holding it low but angled just enough. A quiet click of a shutter, then another. Amber didn't notice. She was too focused on the customer who, despite his sunglasses and cap, seemed to really see her. Max took a few more bites. "This is exactly what I needed," he said. "I'm glad." She started to step away, then hesitated. "You look like you've had a long day, too." He looked up, surprised by her attention. "Yeah," he admitted, "one of those weeks where everything blurs together. Planes, cameras, questions. It's nice to just sit somewhere and be nobody for a minute." She laughed gently. "You picked the right place. We don't do fancy here. Just food, coffee, and the occasional broken jukebox." Max smiled, but said nothing more. Amber nodded once and walked back to refill the coffee machine. 5 minutes later, he stood up, pulled out his wallet, and walked quietly to the register. She didn't even realize he was leaving. "Keep the receipt," he said, sliding his check across the counter. "Thank you for everything today." "Of course," she said, barely glancing at the bill as she rang it up. "Have a good one." He tipped his cap slightly and walked out. The door jingled again. Gone, Amber reached for the receipt to log the payment. She froze. Her hands began to tremble. There, scrawled in neat handwriting across the bottom of the paper, were 4 words. "For Liam's future." Max, next to it, tip. $50,000. Amber's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred. She unclutched the paper like it was a lifeline. Her knees gave out before she could find a chair. The world slowed. "Amber?" One of the cooks shouted from the kitchen, hearing the crash as she hit the floor. "You okay?" She couldn't speak. Tears flooded her face. She covered her mouth and began to sob, not out of pain, but out of sheer, overwhelming disbelief. But diner fell silent. Customers watched as she sat on the floor, trembling, a piece of receipt paper clenched in her fist, like it was sacred. She looked around as if trying to make sense of what had just happened, and then she whispered to no one in particular. Who was he? One of the college kids near the door held up their phone. "You didn't recognize him?" Amber blinked. That was Max Verstappen, Formula One. He's huge. She stared. At them, then at the paper, then back at the door, still swinging slightly from where he had left. She hadn't recognized him. She hadn't treated him like a celebrity, just a man who looked tired, and in return, he had changed her life. By the next morning, Amber's world was no longer her own. What began as a quiet moment in a dusty Florida diner had exploded across social media like wildfire. A teenager's blurry photo of Amber sobbing on the linoleum floor, clutching a receipt, had gone viral. The caption read, "Waitress gets 50K tip from Max Verstappen, has no idea who he is. Purest moment I've ever seen." By sunrise, the diner's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, producers, strangers from other states, all asking the same thing. "Can we speak with Amber?" Local news vans parked outside the diner before she even arrived for her shift. As she stepped out of her newly repaired car, she was greeted not by the usual clatter of coffee cups and regulars asking for the usual, but by cameras and microphones shoved in her face. Amber, how did it feel when you realized it was Max Verstappen? "What are you going to do with the money? Did you know he was famous?" She froze. Her heart pounded in her chest like it was trying to escape. She wanted to run back to the car, hide, scream. But instead she stood still, took a deep breath and answered honestly. "I didn't know who he was," she said softly. "He was just kind, and I was just myself." That clip alone was shared over 10 million times. Inside the diner was a mess of reporters, customers taking selfies, and old friends stopping by just to see her. Her boss, Jerry, a gruff man with a soft spot he rarely admitted, put a protective arm around her. "We can close if you need to," he said. Amber shook her head. "No, I need normal right now." She poured coffee for a trucker like nothing had changed, except everything had. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Max Verstappen was preparing for his next race in Monaco. His team manager scrolled through the endless barrage of headlines and pushed his phone toward him. "You've seen this, right?" Max nodded, already aware. He had tried to stay under the radar, but there was no stopping a story this human, this real. The moment reporters caught up to him, they asked why he had done it. "Why her?" He shrugged. "She reminded me that kindness still matters." "That's it," he said simply. "She didn't treat me like a celebrity. She didn't want anything. Just gave me a piece of her story. That was enough." Back in Florida, Amber tried to find her footing in the chaos. She met with a financial advisor, someone a family friend recommended. She was careful, thoughtful. The last thing she wanted was to let the gift disappear in a flash. She fixed her car first, a reliable used SUV that wouldn't leave her stranded in the diner parking lot anymore. Next, she called the hospital and paid off the balance for Liam's asthma treatments. Thousands gone in a blink, but the relief was worth every penny. She sat at the kitchen table late one night, looking at the remaining balance. The college fund was a no-brainer. Liam deserved the shot she never had. She opened an account in his name, deposited enough to get him through the first years of college, and maybe even a bit more. And then she did something no one expected. She walked into the local women's center and asked to speak to the director. "I want to start a fund," she said, "for single mums, the ones who don't have a Max Verstappen showing up at their booth." The director stared at her, stunned. Amber's voice didn't shake. "Nobody should have to wait for a miracle to feel like they matter." Within weeks, the Liam Hope Fund was born. Word spread fast again, this time not just about a tip, but about what came after, about a woman who turned a blessing into something bigger than herself. Her story wasn't just a viral headline anymore. It was a movement. At home, Liam hugged her tighter than usual. He didn't understand everything happening, but he knew something had changed. "Are we rich now?" he asked one night, eyes wide. Amber kissed his forehead. "No, baby. We're just lucky, and we're going to help others feel lucky too." He smiled, and in that moment she knew. The world had seen her for a minute, but Liam was watching forever. It was early evening, just after the dinner rush, when Amber noticed a familiar figure stepping through the door. No sunglasses. No hat, no crowd, just Max. For a second she froze. He looked different without the layers of anonymity, but the same warmth was there in his eyes. She walked up slowly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips, heart racing with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You came back," she said, not quite a question. Max smiled. "Told you the coffee was good." Amber laughed, more from emotion than humor. "I would have made it fresh." "It's perfect," he said, sliding into the booth. This time, she didn't serve him. She sat across from him. Two people, no cameras. No headlines, just a moment. "I don't even know where to start," Amber said after a quiet pause. "You changed everything." But Max shook his head slowly. "No, Amber, you changed me." She blinked. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the worn Formica table. "You didn't know who I was. You weren't trying to impress anyone. But the way you talked about Liam, about your life, there was something in your voice, strength, grit, warmth. You reminded me of my mom." He paused, the noise of the kitchen humming behind them. "She raised me mostly on her own, too, held things together when we had nothing. I saw her in you, and I remembered what really matters." Amber's eyes welled up. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. You did something most people don't. You showed up. You were real." They sat there for a while, sipping their lukewarm coffee, the silence between them filled with mutual understanding. No one asked for selfies. No reporters barged in. For once, the world left them alone. Later, outside the diner, Amber walked. Max to his car, a sleek, understated black vehicle with no markings of fame. Before getting in, he turned to her. "I heard about the Liam Hope Fund. That was you." Amber nodded. "I just figured if someone like me can get that kind of chance, then maybe I could be someone else's chance." Max smiled, deeply moved. "That's more meaningful than any race I've won." They said goodbye with a handshake that turned into a brief, genuine hug. No words could do justice to what passed between them, a kind of silent respect that didn't need translation, and then he was gone. No press release, no entourage, no spotlight, just the quiet roar of an engine fading into the distance. That night, Amber stood in the doorway of her small home, arms crossed as she watched Liam chase fireflies in the backyard. His laughter echoed in the warm summer air, full of the kind of joy she had almost forgotten. The bills were paid, her car worked, the college fund was growing, but more importantly, she had found something she hadn't felt in years: peace. In the stillness of that moment, she realized something Max had given her without meaning to, a different kind of victory, not one measured in trophies or dollar signs, but in dignity, in hope, in remembering that she mattered, even when the world had forgotten. And as Liam ran back toward her, a firefly cupped in his little hands, she smiled, because maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was the beginning of something new for her, for Liam, for someone else watching from the sidelines. And that was enough.